This is the edition timed at 15:30 GMT, that is 16:30 UK time, on Monday, the 20th of July 2020. This is the KhoodeelaarTV channel test edition of that time, that is 15:30 GMT, 16:30 UK time. And we're doing an update on the bulletins. The updates, the contents are all ours, and the authoring rights are asserted by myself, editor, writer, and conceiver, or the presenter of this program. The topics are, of course, covered by certain other outlets, but not all of them. But the contents of these statements, observations, assertions are mine, based on the evidence. And these are the most important headlines. First of all, Robert Jenrick, the Conservative MP and the Secretary of State for Housing and Communities, that is, including the local councils and regional authorities. Robert Jenrick is in the news again today. Well, he is in the news, has been in the news for weeks now, over his abuse of his position as the Secretary of State, interfering in planning functions of local councils concerned. The biggest in terms of the volume affected by his abuse has, of course, remained the one at West Ferry Printworks, where the pornographic billionaire Dirty Desmond has a stake, serious stake. He plans to make hundreds of millions by degenerating the area by building expensive housing that is beyond the reach of local people, in fact, beyond the reach of most people in ordinary income groups. So Jenrick is this week in similar bad news, but as I said, the volume is smaller than the volume entailed in the abuse of his position over the West Ferry Printworks planning abuse or planning decision. The local council there is, of course, Tower Hamlets, and in the latest one in Kent, it is a local small council, Swale Council, but it is in the area, I think, generally known as Sittingbourne in Kent. But if there is any inaccuracy in this locational description, that we shall correct this in due course. But I think I'm right in saying that it's in the generally known area called Sittingbourne. And it is an application, planning application, that is involving another builder of properties. And Jenrick has got form. He keeps featuring in news, bad news for himself, that concern the housing rights of ordinary people and of the communities, and falls foul of the basic expectations of democratic accountability and integrity of office. So Jenrick is in typical form affecting the housing rights of the people in the country, and in the particularly targeted areas, targeted by his abusive agenda, where he is getting bunks, or the Conservative Party is getting bunks by abusing and exploiting his post in housing planning issues. And Jenrick is, of course, also silent, as far as we can see, about the crane collapse in Burlington E3 on the 7th of July 2020. This is something that we have been talking about and will be discussing more in this edition of the test broadcast of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel. And we are going to discuss the role of the local Tower Hamlets Council as well, not just the role of Robert Jenrick. The misleadingly innocent looking or less threatening looking or less fascistic looking holder of the post of Secretary of State in the Department for Work and Pensions is a person called Therese Coffey. Coffee is spelled Coffey, and Therese is a French spelling in her preferred form, but normally she can be called Teresa Coffey, anglicized. But she is actually in post. She has been in post in the last few months, and she has been fending off criticism about her department's record and behavior and conduct in all kinds of wrongdoings, including the enforced regime and the agenda enforced by the main holder of that post, Dracula Duncan Smith, that is Ian Duncan Smith, and his political agenda courier, daughter Dracula Esther McVie. These are people that have been associated with the regime of UK central government forcing people in low income or no income to commit suicide. And this is something that is belatedly being looked at, apparently, in the current sitting or session of the so-called parliament by the Work and Pensions so-called Select Committee. I use a lot of so-called because of the evidence of the conduct and the delivery of these departments or these units or these outfits are not anywhere near what they should be according to the descriptions. So the Work and Pensions Select Committee, so-called, is chaired currently by an East London MP, but a Cambridge titled man called Stephen Timms. Timms is not the only Cambridge titled person doing this, Oxbridge titled person doing the so-called inquiry into poverty or scrutiny of the department causing poverty, inflicting poverty, and penalizing the poor. There is a man called Clyde Betts. Clyde is a bad name historically for East India Company and all the rest of it. And Clyde Betts is also another Oxbridge linked or Oxbridge license or Oxbridge titled holder of a chair of the committee that looks at or supposedly supposed to look at the behavior of the Ministry of Housing. Clyde Betts has been in that post for too long. Clyde Betts is a proven liar and a racist liar at that. And I'm going on record saying that and inviting Clive, the Oxford licensed racist liar, to challenge me on the evidence. Instead of going sneakily and abusing the sneaky route to somehow question me without my being able to hold him to account, let the racist liar Clive Betts challenge me on the assertion I'm making that he lied for the crooks in Tower Hamlets Council in 2016 when I gave him enough evidence to actually justifiably ask them questions about their record of lying on the relevant aspects of the claims concerned. And his employee or his select committee's employee at the time, a woman, was also behaving in a racist denial mode as she obstructed my investigation into Hamlets Council through that committee by making a corrupt, stupid, moronic assertion that my substantiated evidence did not constitute enough evidence. How dare she? These are people that are supposed to be in Parliament holding the executive to account, and they are the ones who are lying openly without any shame or any hesitation. And the confidence, the racist confidence of Clive Betts and his committee personnel concerned exposes the charade that is the Labour Party's claim that it is against racism. And I go back to the question that I posed for many years in the direction of Jeremy Corbyn and his leadership. If he was innocent of the charge that the Jewish people had made against him, that he was anti Semitic or he was tolerating anti Semitism, that is, anti Jewish hatred and agenda and other things against the basic human rights of the Jewish people because they were Jewish. If he was innocent of that charge and if he had nothing to hide, how come that Corbyn has not made any bold, significant, memorable, important statement, even to this day, even months after he was ousted from office by his being the garden gnome in that position? He has not made any statement that is memorable, significant, relevant, fit for purpose against racism. Now, racism is a genus, and its species includes anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, anti-Sikh, and anti-other people based on their religion or their so-called ethnicity. So I am asking the Labour Party's current leader, Keir Starmer, what is his response to the racism that is raging in this country, in the Conservative Party, in the ranks of the Labour Party, in the ranks of the media, and other places where the opinions are formed, influenced, shaped, and legitimized, and peddled and repeated. What is his policy? Keir Starmer answer the question. And Keir Starmer cannot answer the question because Keir has got a record of complete, utter non-commitment against racism or about racism. And he has got other issues to address or answer or account for in terms of the post that now he holds as the leader of the opposition and as the overly hyped likely challenger to Boris Johnson, the incumbent in post at number 10 Downing Street. Now, Keir Starmer's leadership has got a woman called Thangam Debonair. Now, Thangam Debonair is a West Bristol MP or Bristol West constituency MP for the Labour Party, and she is the so-called shadow to Robert Jenrick. As I said yesterday, her statement about the evictions nightmare, as featured on the front page of the Morning Star last week, was completely devoid of real teeth and substance. And I don't think that she has actually updated her position since that statement was carried by the Morning Star, the only publication that gave that kind of prominence to that statement. Thangam Debonair is not somebody that appears to understand the magnitude of the horrors and the nightmares that are inflicted on people that are subjected to eviction proceedings, eviction assaults, and eviction notices, and eviction agenda. And we shall be giving details about the eviction nightmare being caused and inflicted on people, caused to and inflicted on people in Tower Hamlets and in Newham in later editions. We shall be touching on more on that in this edition later. Now, the reason why Keir Starmer has got Thangam Debonair partly to do with the fact that he thinks that she was a kind of soft Corbynite, that she was not really part of the so-called hardline Corbynites or Corbynistas. Now let me say this, that more than 30 years ago, when I first physically met Jeremy Corbyn, it was at a public meeting which I addressed first and he addressed after me, immediately after me. And it was held at the Altavali Park in the Whitechapel Road near the Aldgate Eastern exit and entrance. Now, Altavali Park has been a venue of many meetings, public meetings, including several meetings, apparently about opposing racism. But the Altavali Park, as I have said before, has been taken over by agents of elements of propagandists for a cause that is actually not related to Britain, let alone to racism as we confront it and um, overcome it or try to overcome it and its impact. It is the monument or so-called structure that has been built in the corner of what is Altavali Park by people who say that this is a monument to the struggle for the Bangla language against the perceived agenda against Bangla language in the previously united Pakistan, that is Bangladesh and West Pakistan, what is now Pakistan. Now that battle never entailed anything like the number of people that have been murdered by racists and are being murdered by racists in this country. And that battle had nothing to do with English racism. It was to do with something else. That was to do with the domination of the advocates of Urdu language and by contemporary extension of the Hindi language in India. I'll come to that in a minute for the update, and the update is warranted by the fact that to oppose racism, we need in the Altavali Park the monument that shows directly, immediately, instantly a symbol of defiance and opposition and rejection of racism. Anyone looking at the monument as it is now and has been there and is not from Bangladesh and does not know the history of the 1952 campaign about the Bangla language in then Pakistan would need a great deal of interest and a lot of time, and for somebody to be very knowledgeable about the whole history of linguistic rights and language rights, human rights, and all the rest of it, to before they understand why that monument is there. It's not an individual's name that instantly comes to mind to the passerby, but if it was an Altavali monument, not his statue, but a monument to the struggle against racism, and including the name of Altavali, including the name of Tosir Ali, including the name of Ishaq Ali, Kenneth Singh, Blair Peach, and other people, then it would be immediately understandable and it will have the meaning and the purpose intended that we have to be seen to be actively engaged against racism and racist violation and denial. And I think that that is the importance of this kind of monuments, that they carry contemporary, current, truthful, uncontaminated message. Now there is a similar trouble that somebody has put up a video showing that a white woman was seen to be questioning a monument to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman that is actually sited in the Sydney Street, not far from Whitechapel Station. And it is something that has been discussed before when the Towners Council at one stage considered removing it because of complaints from quite a number of local residents, most of them white people or non-Bangladeshi people, questioning the location and existence of that statue of Sheikh Mujib. Now, my position has been that the statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, I think, is unnecessary in England because most people who are likely ever to have any respect for his sacrifice or his struggle or his politics are going to be, compared to the overall population, very much limited to the Bangladeshis. Not even Indian people, or people of Indian origin or background, or the so-called Indian diaspora, are likely to be fascinated by any statue of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So it's the Bangladeshi community. Now, let's look at the Bangladeshi community status. If the Bangladeshi community are going to be influenced by a statue, then there is a conflict there in terms of the worshipping idolatry. And there is a big section in the community, in the population, that is opposed to idolatry based on faith. So that reduces the number of people who are likely to be supporters. So whoever going to be supporting Sheikh Mujib's statue is going to be in a minority by any measure. And what are they going to do with the statue? If they're going to be inspired by the statue, then obviously they are not genuine supporters of any legacy that is genuinely left by the struggle of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So what is going to happen is exactly the repetition, repeating the same kind of poisonous hatred of Bangladeshis by people like Peter Golds. Peter Golds is a conservative member of the Hrs Council. He's one of the two, but he's probably the only one now because Andrew Woods has actually resigned from the conservative councillors group. I think, although Andrew has not told me this, I understand that he has been sufficiently fed up by the behavior of his colleague Peter Golds. Andrew can clarify this, and if he wants to comment it on camera, he's welcome to do that in an edition or in more than one edition of the Khoodeelaar TV channel. This is an open invitation I made to him first at the end of February, I think, when he appeared at the Oxford House rally cobbled together to promote Stuart as a potential member, as a potential mayor of the great city of London in opposition to Sadiq Khan or whoever else, the Conservative Party after Sean Bailey, whoever they put up, I don't know, but that was Stuart's shebang, if you like. And there I saw Andrew Woods very briefly, and he promised to have a meeting with me so that he could answer questions. When I contacted him later, he became quite mysterious. He was not saying no, he was not saying yes, and he was being completely insignificant in his stance. If he didn't want to speak to me in response to my questions, which I had clearly stated to him at Oxford House, he could have easily said to me, he did not like to answer questions, and he especially did not like to answer questions that came from me. If he is genuinely different politically, again, in terms of the context of the community as a whole in Tower Hamlets, different from Peter Golds, then he should show by his conduct that he is different, that he is respectful, and that he keeps his word, and he does not discriminate against me either because of my politics or my style or my record or my agenda and or my whatever it is, ethnic or religious or linguistic or cultural background, identity, affinity that he recognizes in me or he associates me with. If he is a better counselor and better person than Peter Golds, then he should show that by his conduct, not behave in a mysterious way and give me the reason to include his behavior in this kind of broadcast. And as I said, I'm giving this opportunity to Andrew to contact me. He knows how to contact me and explain his lack of keeping his word that he gave me at Oxford House, and then he made all kinds of excuses and never followed up. I come to Peter Golds. Peter Golds has been fated, to use a French root word, fated in the mainstream British media concerned as the hero, campaigner, champion of democracy, accountability, transparency in Tower Hamlets as against the regime of the Muslim, extremist Muslim-backed Lutfur Rahman. Now, Muslim-backed or extremist-backed is a term that came into, or as a phrase, or came into being at the insistence of Andrew Gilligan, against whom Lutfur Rahman had filed a complaint with the so-called press regulators. And the regulators did not uphold Lutfur Rahman's complaint. And it was settled, or it was allowed for Andrew Gilligan to continue to use the expression that Luther Roman is, was, had been extremists backed. Now, Peter Goals and Andrew Gilligan and Ted Jury and Eric Pickles and Mark Baines, these are the names of a cabal of anti-Muslim racists and fakers and propagandists that completely conflated Luther Roman with the ordinary Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets and ordinary Muslims in Tower Hamlets, and by extension in the rest of the city and capital. I'm doing this in English, although it's Khoodeelaar campaign and I should be including the Siloti language contents. I will do that later, but briefly, but mainly I'm doing this in English because it is going to be one of the published records which all the people who rely on English must consult and deal with the challenges it contains. I am doing that on purpose because I don't think there is any outlet that is doing this. And it is time, and especially in view of the many faceted emergency we are facing, this is important to get the truth across and the perpetrators of the wrongs and the wrongdoing people to be held to account and for them to come forward and to explain why they are doing wrongs and spreading poison in the community. Now, Peter Goals is guilty of several undeniable incidents or instances of anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic, anti-democratic lies and lying. He stood in March in the Brady Center in 2010. Brady Center is in Hanbury Street off Brick Lane, not far from the Whitechapel station. This person stood there as the leader of the conservative group of councillors, which was probably only himself. And he stood there himself, I mean by himself, in effect, because there was nobody else. Even if they were in posts as councillors in the name of the Conservative Party, they were hardly ever getting any platform, and they were hardly ever getting any mention. So Peter Goals, although he is not from Tower Hamlets originally, has monopolized the name of the Conservative Party for a very long time. In fact, since he was foisted on Tower Hamlets, I don't know by what secret agenda was operated inside the Conservative machine to foist him on Tower Hamlets. But since he was foisted, he has not actually helped the Conservatives, really. He has created a poisonous atmosphere of hostility between people, and I'll give some examples which Conservatives must answer, which Boris Johnson's regime must answer, which this name, this is a difficult, complicated name, Priti Patel. Priti is it sounds in English it sounds obviously pretty, and in the Hindi, Sanskrit-based usage across India or Indian languages, it also means quite a positive thing. In fact, it means what Indira Gandhi's second name meant, Priyadarshini. It's a good-looking female. So Priti Patel, as the Home Secretary, has got a big question to answer, and I'm putting it to her straight in this. Why does she think any member of the Conservative Party should be allowed to remain in post, either locally or centrally or in the Houses of Parliament, while they are known to be utterers of anti-Muslim hatred or racist hatred? And I'm asking this question of Priti Patel. Answer this question. And I'm citing as background references all the Conservative members, including Saida Warsi, who have been for years demanding that the Conservative Party take action against the anti-Muslims among them. They, of course, Saida Warsi is a brainwashed kind of sub-ignorant, subconscious member of the community. She repeats this stupid word Islamophobia. I have discussed this before, and I'll come to that in another edition, not today. Islamophobia is itself anti-Muslim. So what we are saying is that anyone who says they are against Islamophobes, then they themselves are being anti-Muslim, because Islamophobia means fear of Islam, which means, if accepted, that term means that Islam is inherently something to be feared. So that is where I'm saying that I'll put this in another detailed form later, another edition. But this time, I'm saying to Saida Warsi that she should consider what I'm saying here and stop using Islamophobia in the way that she uses, imitating the racists who claim to be, in her context, anti-racist when they condemn Islamophobic attacks, etc., etc. So the Conservative Party has got a problem, and Boris Johnson is, of course, a known spewer of hatred against people of Liverpool, people of Turkey, people of African, people of other backgrounds. And of course, he is an utterer of anti-Muslim hatred, and he is an imitator, follower, and he resembles Donald Trump. So we have got a bara in Tower Hamlets, which has got mentions in Washington, in Donald Trump's various agencies and propagandist publications. The Tower Hamlets is actually occupied by fanatic, radical Muslims that are running riot and are banning people from practicing their anti-Muslim or non-Islamic cultures, and they're stopping people from walking freely in the streets of Tower Hamlets. This is a result of Ted Jury, Eric Pickles, Peter Golds, Andrew Gilligan doing the propaganda around Luther Roman being imposed as mayor. And I challenged Andrew Gilligan in the Commercial Road just before the election. The first election for the executive mayor took place in October 2010. And he was being accompanied by a number of stooges, female Bengali stooges, that had been attached to him as a protection. How dare those crooks think that they cheated us, that they actually conned us into believing that those were independent-minded female warriors against jihadi Muslims. We are not jihadi Muslim community. We're ordinary people who just happen to have a diversity of religious beliefs, and those beliefs include Islam, Hindu, Sikh, Christian, Jewish, across the eastern of London, and some Jains. I'm sure that there are some Jains people and Buddhist people as well. But numerically, it is the Christian people, the Jewish people, and the Muslim people that are significant, more significant numerically than any others in Tower Hamlets. So none of us, I don't think, I have absolutely seen no evidence of any part of the population of any faith group behaving in an extremist way because of their faith. So whoever gave the idea to Donald Trump about Tower Hamlets must include Andrew Gilligan. And Andrew Gilligan, as his career has shown, has been serving the agenda, the same agenda of the Satan, the devil, the big criminal that Boris Johnson serves, both at the Spectator and elsewhere, and also when Boris Johnson became mayor of London after Ken the Lying Livingstone failed to expose Boris Johnson's lying and dishonesty. Boris Johnson rewarded Andrew Gilligan with a highly paid compared to the job, compared to the contribution he made to the well-being of civilized London, or civilizing London, or the cause of civic duties in London. He was given a pretext as a commissioner for cycling or whatever, and he got a lot of money out of that. Now, cycling is a bourgeois agenda in London, and we shall come to that at another time. East London is not populated by ordinary people who use cycling a lot. But that doesn't mean that we are opposed to people doing cycling or using cycles, or people who have the option or the actual interest in using cycles. What we're saying is that the agenda is lopsided and it's misleading. It is not representative in social, sociological, economic terms. It's not representative of the people of Tower Hamlets or of Newham or of the adjoining other areas of other boroughs like Barking and Dagenham and Waltham Forest or Hackney. Of course, in Hackney, there are patches of bourgeois takeovers, and we'll come to that in appropriate parts of the forthcoming later editions of the KhoodeelaarTV channel. I have to say, while in Hackney, or while talking about Hackney, something about this title called Hackney Citizen. Now, Hackney Citizen is a racist gang of liars that poses as being citizens activist group. Now that crook who owns the main power post had a temporary publication called Eastern Citizens. When he found that I was the main contributor to the comment section and I had posted quite literally hundreds of comments that were very extensive, detailed, fact-based, and nobody was coming forward to challenge me, that racist, lying creep closed down his entire second newspaper. Can you imagine? This is world exclusive, man. This is world exclusive assertion in a series of exclusives. So that kind of racists are actually colluding with the likes of Peter Goulds and contaminating the atmosphere of the whole of East London, the whole of London. So what I'm saying is that people who say that they are actually respectful of the Black Lives Matter are in need of being scrutinized themselves, because they didn't actually say those things in support of, or let alone in solidarity with, the Black Lives Matter protesters until the protests actually took over lots of areas and spread right across the United States. And this week's continuing battle in Portland in the USA is a reminder of just how serious the challenge is that is being posed to basic democracies by the likes of Trump and his fascist, racist, anti-Muslim inciters. In the context of Peter Goulds, no member of the Tower Hamlets Council at any time during the entire duration of Peter Goulds being a councillor has actually presented a fact-based, original, substantial, evidence-packed case for Peter Goulds to be prosecuted for inciting racism. Instead, they have been running away from his chasing of them. Now, that should not have been in that order. But the reason is to be found in the corrupt lack of education on the part of those who control channels like the Channel Slave. Channel Slave is otherwise known as Channel S, which is supposed to have been started as Sillard Channel. Now its owner de facto was hosting a sitting of the discussion during the period 2012 and early 2013. Now the date can be checked. When Peter Goulds was in the studio and he was referring to the demand for the retention of the name of the particular council ward as Spitalfields and Bangla Town, because the Boundary Commission was being asked to change the name from Spitalfields and Banglatown to just Spitalfields, or from Banglatown to Spitalfields. It was one of those things. We can check the details by looking at the actual contents of the text. But essentially, it was about the Banglatown part of it. And the Banglatown name was being condemned by Peter Golds in that studio, in the discussion, allegedly, apparently, visually chaired by the person who owned that channel. Now, Peter Golds was not challenged in that discussion. In fact, he was not even challenged to explain why he compared the demand for the retention of the word Banglatown with the similar demand coming from the kangaroos, or coming from those who would, he suggested, demand next the naming of a part or an area or a street after kangaroos. The only person who made a comment about that in that discussion was not allowed to pursue his hopefully potentially extensive challenge to Peter Golds. His name is Shundarali, or otherwise known as Muhammad Junaid. He is a member of the, or was at the time, a member of the Labour Party, and he was based in the Shadwell ward. He is the only one who made that remark, but nobody else. All of them were Bangladeshis, but they did not make any comment about Peter Golds making an anti-Bangladeshi, brazenly racist, hateful, contemptuous comment about the place being similar to a place that might be called after kangaroos. So I'm saying here that the Conservative Party has a duty, a job, a task, a duty to discipline Peter Golds or expel him from the Conservative Party, or withdraw their, whatever it is called, the whip from him. And I'm saying to the wider community in Tower Hamlets, those who oppose racism of all backgrounds, to support a campaign that the Khoodeelaar campaign is now announcing will be started, to have Peter Golds thrown out of Tower Hamlets Council for his racist, hateful, dishonest behavior. And there are other evidential episodes that I could mention, or I could re-mention, that I've mentioned before about Peter Golds. And the fact that the Labour Party has not taken any initiative against Peter Golds is because Peter Golds supports the racist agenda that John Biggs follows. And John Biggs follows whatever he follows, and he is followed by the stooges of all backgrounds that actually have to follow him for their careers. So these are the challenges, these are the actual unique situations in Tower Hamlets, and that is why this broadcast and other publications contain exclusive, world exclusive evidence. No other outlet will publish, and most other publications or outlets will not even have access to. This is the product of a severely demanding schedule of research ongoing round the clock 24 hours. And we have got an update about this Therese Coffey. Now, Therese Coffey is due to appear in the House of Commons Select Committee, Work and Pension Select Committee, this Wednesday, on the 22nd of July 2020. So before that, we shall be submitting to the Work and Pensions Committee a detailed argument. The length is not the detail, the actual substance is the detail, argument against the DWP, against the behavior of the local Tower Hamlets Council in collusion with the DWP. Now, when I appeared on a program called Straight Dialogue, hosted by Shoaib Chaudhry on the 14th of March 2018, I appeared opposite Robin Wales. Robin Wales was at the time, 14th of March 2018, still in post as the mayor of Newham. Now, Robin Wales said that the reason why he had not taken any action through the court system against the Conservative Party imposing restrictions on housing initiatives and housing kind of extension, council housing extension by local council, his council, Newham, was because he, Robin Wales, had been advised by his legal advisors or legal consultants, or his department was, or his office was advised by lawyers he and they consulted that it was not to be done. My question to Robin Wales was constitutional. I said that as a constitutional law activist, which I have been for decades, long before Robin Wales even left his primary school, he arrived in Newham well after I had been active in Newham. In addition to Tower Hamlets, but I was already in elected post in the particular academic institution as a student voice, and which is now the University of East London. It was not the University of East London at the time, it was the North East London Polytechnic, NELP. And it was actually the Northeast London Polytechnic was the sponsored institution, sponsored by three councils, including the Waltham Forest and Newham. Now, Robin Wales said that he had been advised by the legal consultants or legal advisors not to take action in court against the Conservative government restricting housing developments to meet the needs of the people who are still in housing waiting list and other bad housing conditions in Newham. So I said to him, and as I said that to him, I said to the viewers, to the camera, that notice what he's saying. So he said, in reply to my challenge, why he didn't take that, he said that he was advised not to. And I said, give me the advice, give me the copy of the advice. Now, Wales may or may not be asleep, or may not have been asleep at the time I was speaking. I spoke and I speak, and I have been speaking as a very well-informed lawyer, but because of racists, they don't want to recognize this. They don't see me carrying a QC or barrister badge, but I have been an active constitutional law activist and advocate for longer than they have been alive, most of them. So I said to the viewers that look at him, what he's saying, remember what he's saying. Now this is very important. The debate in this country in Parliament, I'm doing this Khoodeelaar broadcast from Tower Hamlets, East London, but actually I'm addressing the biggest issues, some of the biggest issues that the Labour Party in the last 50 years has failed to even grasp. So he was saying that the Conservatives were stopping the Labour councils from doing housing, building and construction, whatever, to meet the needs of the communities of these Labour-controlled council boroughs. So I said, this is not acceptable. I said that it is not acceptable. I'm not a member of the Conservatives and I would not have anything to do with their agenda. But the fact is that the agenda of the Tories does not give the excuse to the Labour mayor or the Labour council or the Labour borough leader or leadership to not do what they can do, regardless of what the Conservatives in government or out of government are saying. Now, 2 years and a few months later, now it's May, June, July, 2 years and 2 months after Robin Wales lied in that program, I'm still waiting for Newham Council to provide me with a copy of the legal advice that Robin Wales dishonestly claimed he had been given against taking court action against the Conservatives' agenda, stopping the house building and house selling or whatever else was entailed in the particular brief, which supposedly was covered by the supposed advice by the supposed lawyers. What I'm saying is that I'm going to ask Newham Council to name the advisors or advisor, whether it was a single barrister or a QC or whatever else was the source of the so-called legal advice, to provide that. Because right now, as I speak, in town hamlets in Newham and in other East London and Inner London boroughs, I think there are several 100,000 people on the waiting list in London. And this is unacceptable. And the reason I said earlier at the beginning of this edition about Jeremy Corbyn is that Corbyn has been demonized by any objective description of the way that he has been described by the dirty diggers, scum, and his paid slaves, propagandists. The language that they have used to demonize Corbyn has been absolutely atrocious, horrifying, and really distressing by any standard. That is absolutely undeniable. And I deny nothing of that. And I say full solidarity with Corbyn as a human being for putting up with that and withstanding that and all the rest of it universally that I can say and I'm able to say. But I have to make the distinction between his human position and his duties and the opportunities politically that he failed to grasp in the post of leader. When Corbyn was in post as leader of the Labour Party, the most persistent visual footage that can describe him in relation to the mainstream broadcast media in this country, in Britain, is him coming out of his house, wherever it was, and being greeted by a camera crew, fronted by one dominant one, perhaps, or the muscly one, holding the camera to him, and him running, literally running away from that. Sour-faced, absolutely sour-faced. That is the persistent, dominant footage that I associate with Jeremy Corbyn being the leader and coming out of his house and avoiding, running away from the media. And I have said in print and in the posts on the social media, Khoodeelaar campaign posts, I have said dozens of times, if not more, that he was the garden gnome. And despite all these demonizing attacks on him by the right wing and the racists and the anti-Muslims and others, it is Corbyn who lost the election, or it's Corbyn who actually gave the anti-Labour Party forces the advantage at the 2019 general election in this country. And I'm saying this because the footage will show that Corbyn missed or ignored or chose to ignore or chose to miss literally hundreds of platforms to him on the media. Because even if they recorded, or even if they would record and not later broadcast his comments, he could still morally, evidentially, factually, politically, democratically, transparently say that they were guilty of a wrongdoing and a conspiracy. But he never actually spoke to them. When he spoke to them, he spoke like a child. He spoke like an ill-briefed child in a hurry. Now, I cannot understand how that same Jeremy Corbyn has been transformed in the last few weeks in the online broadcasts that he has been appearing in, where he is being almost coherent about most of the topics that he's talking about. And I have been, as the organizer of the Khoodeelaar campaign, adding like to most of his broadcasts and even commented on one about the future of the planet and all the rest of it. So Corbyn actually has the capacity to articulate reasonably enough a particular standpoint and agenda and analysis. And he chose to not do that. And I'm coming to that because of Corbyn acting as Len McCluskey's stooge, or as a stooge of McCluskey or his likes. Those stooge masters or stooge controllers did not want the Labour Party to hold the local Labour councils accountable, which is why I say that Robin Wales is as guilty as the so-called left-wing alternative leaders of Labour groups in Labour-controlled councils across the country are. What I'm saying is that their being right-wing and left-wing makes no difference to the local communities they're failing to serve. And I'm saying also constitutionally, legally, that there is a standard of objectivity. There is a standard of objective duty owed to the local community and electors by people who get into elected positions and power, regardless of their party political card. And that standard of objectivity is not even recognized in the vocabulary of Corbyn or Keir Starmer, the forensic, brilliant QC. What a joke! This guy is a complete machine. And he's a machine, a robotic machine, who is not properly educated about the law. And I'll come to that in due course, but not in this edition because it will take about an hour for me to diagnose Keir Starmer's legal ignorance and his record in terms of Tower Hamlets. I raised a number of issues of criminals about to do severe damage to the community and to human society while Starmer was in post of the DPP, and Starmer completely ignored my communications. So I'll raise those with him again in a letter, directly asking him to deny my questions to him and the information that I gave him about imminent danger being plotted at the time against the world's human resources, very serious human resources that I am responsible for collecting and organizing. And these were about to come under attack from criminals that were plotting attacks. And Keir Starmer ignored them, and I have not forgotten them, and the humanity will not forget them because the damage that has been done because of Keir Starmer not taking the action. The same way I have got criticism of the holders of the post successively of Mayor of London, and again this will be covered in the detailed piece that we'll be delivering online as part of that discussion about Keir Starmer and his unsuitability, unfitness, and his incompetence and his lack of integrity in terms of the ethical morality of the law. And what has happened in Tower Hamlets in relation to Shamima Begum is also relevant to Keir Starmer's failures. Keir Starmer has not made any play about Shamima Begum. Now, Shamima Begum is a child. She's one of a number of children that have been allowed, exposed to the abuse that they suffered, as a result of which they got derailed and they got taken wherever they went. And that failure has not been seen as being recognized by Keir Starmer at any stage, whether he was a shadow minister or a shadow MP or an MP or a DPP, whatever the actual date when these girls, these children, were exposed to the process of whatever they went through, was covered by Keir Starmer holding a publicly paid or publicly elected post. This man is now being touted as the next prime minister because they're comparing him with Boris Johnson almost at a daily kind of interval. So the man has got potential to occupy the most powerful political position in this country. So, what is his record? If that is his record, that he was completely detached from what was going on in our hamlets and what was going on in local areas, then what proof is there? What evidence is there that he will be in touch with these same communities when he gets the power? He won't be. So I'm saying that campaigns like the Khoodeelaar campaign and other little people that are active but not known have got the duty, have got the actual burden to carry on campaigning for justice, for the right things to be done by the council, by the elected post holders, and for the protection and the defense of the children, not like Shamima Begum, but others of other descriptions of lack of safeguarding that takes place in society, in the communities. And I'm saying that especially the Bangladeshi community, I'm going to come to that and I'm going to speak first few lines in Bengali or Bangla, as I have been requested to do by some people. And I say that there is no better source for me to start with than Qazi Nazrul Islam, the বিদ্রোহী কবি, বাংলাদেশের জাতীয় কবি, বলবীর, বল উন্নত মম শির, শির নেহারি আমারি, নত শির ওই শিকর হিমাদ্রির. This is the announcement, the declaration, the assertion of identity and personality by the national poet of Bangladesh, Qazi Nazrul Islam. তাইনি গান হয়েছেন এমন সময়, যে সময় এই এভারেস্ট বিজয় করা যে নিউজিল্যান্ডর এডমান্ড হিলারি, ইতার নামও মিনছে না কেউ, ইতার জন্ম হয়তো হয়েছিল। নজরুল ইসলাম যদি বাংলাদেশের একজন মানুষ বা বাংলাভাষী মানুষের দেশের এক গাঁওর মানুষ, তাই যদি অত বড় একটা কবিতা শুরু করতে পারলা আজ থেকে 100 বছর আগে, 100 বছর বাদে আমরার মানুষ ও তান নামে যারা কইতে ও জাতির মানুষ, তারা তানে যে দেশের জাতীয় কবি করা হয়েছে ও দেশের মানুষ বা পার্শ্ববর্তী দেশের মানুষ যেন তার জন্ম হয়েছে চুরুলিয়া। এখন এই মানুষের অবস্থা কিটা? টেলিভিশনও যদি দেখা যায় মানুষের মায়ের, এই যে করোনা ভাইরাসে মায়ের যে ওর বাংলাদেশে লাঠি দিয়া দুমে মানুষের রাস্তাত ফিটানিওর, আর নাহলে দুমে বেইমানি করিয়া বগাস ডাক্তার হলে তারা ডাকাতি করিয়া আরো তাড়াতাড়ি খবর ফাটান নাইনি, এই যে করোনা ভাইরাসের সার্টিফিকেট দিয়া। কোনো মানবাধিকার, মানুষের অধিকারের কোনো এখানো চিহ্ন নাই। এটা কিটা? এটা মানুষ খান্তা গেইলা, ইতার নেতা খে আর ইতার সূত্র খে। এরা নজরুল ইসলামের কবিতা পড়ে না। আর নজরুল ইসলাম কোন ফানি আর কোন বাদ খাই এইটা লেখলার, তারা কিতা পানি খায়, কোন বাদ খায়, যে তারার মাথার মাঝে ইটা কোনটা নাই। সিমিলারলি রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর যারা তারা হয় কবি গুরু, তারা কয় আমি কইয়ার কারণে কিতা লাগবে তারা, আমি তো কবি গুরু কইয়া বেনোয়া হয়ে যাই না। আমি দেখি বেটায় কিতা লেখছে অক্টা দিয়া, কবি গুরু এটা তাকে বড় হইলো বেটায় লেখছে কিতা। ওই যে কইছি আমি আগে কয়েকবার কইছি, আরো কইম আমি, যে মহাসমুদ্রের শতবৎসরের কল্লোল কেহ যদি এমন করিয়া বাদিয়া রাখিতে পারিত। এই পর্যন্ত আমি কই, কারণ যে লম্বা হইলে মানুষে মনে রাখতে পারত না, এইখান মনে রাখা সম্ভব হইল। মহাসমুদ্রের শতবৎসরের কল্লোল কেহ যদি এমন করিয়া বাদিয়া রাখিতে পারিত, এটা হইল যে বড় সাগর যে আছে, এটার যে 100 বছরের যে ফানি ফেনা আর একটার আওয়াজ, এটা যদি এখানো করিয়া রাখা যাইত একটা ছোট জায়গা, একটা গরো, যে নমুনা হইল না, এটা হইল লাইব্রেরি। মানে যে শক্তি এটার মাঝে রইল না, এটা একটা লাইব্রেরির মাঝে আছে। তার মানে হইল এই যে বই আছে নানি বা পুস্তক আছে বা বইয়ের সমান যেটা এখন আজকাল যেটা হয়েছে অডিও দিয়ে বা ভিডিও দিয়া, এগুলোর মাঝে জ্ঞানের যে সংকলন এবং কালেকশন, জ্ঞান, মানব জাতির জ্ঞান যেটা, ওটাও এখানে করে রাখা হয়েছে। এর চেয়ে বড় শক্তিশালী জিনিস আর নাই মানুষের জীবনও নাই। এই আর্টিকেল তাই লেখছেন রবীন্দ্রনাথে, লেখা হয়েছেন যে সারা দুনিয়ার মানুষ, বিভিন্ন জাতির মানুষের বিভিন্ন ধরনের অবদান রাখে মানব জাতির জীবন নয়। আর তাই কইছেন, দুঃখ করে কইছেন যে আমরা তাই যারার কথা মাতিরা যে সমাজ গোষ্ঠীর কথা মাতি, আমরা বাঙালিরা খিতা মানুষের মানব জাতিরে আমরা দিয়ার, কোন উপহার আমরা দিয়ার, কোন নেতৃত্ব দিয়ার, কোন উদাহরণ, কোন এক্সাম্পল আমরা দিয়ার, এটা আমরা দেওয়া দরকার। তা আমি মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশি হইয়া যদি কোনো মানুষ কোনো জায়গাত, বা বাঙালি হইয়া কোনো জায়গায় যদি কেউ যায়, তো এই জাতীয় যে লিডার, চিন্তার লিডার, জীবন দর্শনের লিডার নাই, যে সমাজের অতীতে আছে নাই, এই মানুষের তো কোনো অভাব থাকার কথা নাই দিশা পাইবার। ওখান থেকে দিশা আনতো, কিন্তু আনে না। করে কিতা, এই যে লাগি যায় এই আরেকজনের দলালিত, নাইলে আরেকজনের করে দি যায় গিয়া মিসামাতের সামান্য সুবিধার দেয়। এখন ইস্ট লন্ডন যদি টাওয়ার হামলেটস কাউন্সিলে যদি মানুষ হোমলেস থাকে এই 20,000 কি 24,000 কি 26,000 কি 28,000, এনি নাম্বার হইলে তো কয়েক হাজার বাংলাদেশি মানুষ অটোমেটিক্যালি এর মাঝে গনার মাঝে পড়তে হইব। এবং যতদিন ধরে ই বর্তমান 26 কি 28 কি 24 কি 22,000 মানুষ হাউজিং ওয়েটিং লিস্ট, এই সময় তো সব সময় কয়েক দর্জন মানুষ এখানে, এটলিস্ট 2 দর্জন তো কমসে কম 24 জন কমসে কম বাংলাদেশি কাউন্সিলর টাওয়ার হামলেটস কাউন্সিলও ফদো আসেন, মানে কাউন্সিলর হিসাবে জাগাত আসেন, এবং কাউন্সিলর হিসেবে এই অ্যালাউন্স নিদ্রা, আরো বাকি আরো কতটা নিদ্রা। এটা কি লইল, এরা কেউ মাতিছে নি। আজকে 1990 থেকে লইয়া আজকে 30 বছর মেইন নাম্বার অফ কাউন্সিলর্স টাওয়ার হামলেটস কাউন্সিলও 30 বছর ধরেই বাংলাদেশি মানুষ কাউন্সিলর হইতরা। এর আগে যারা আসলে এরা নাম্বার 2 বা 3 বা 4 আছিল আর কি। কিন্তু গত 30 বছর ধরে যদি বাংলাদেশি মানুষ কাউন্সিলর হইয়া থাকে, আর সব সময় থাকে, মেজরিটি বাংলাদেশি কাউন্সিলর 1990 থাকি, কিন্তু এর বাদে যদি আধা থাকে বাংলাদেশি আর আধা থাকে নন বাংলাদেশি, কিন্তু আধা বাংলাদেশি যে আছেন, আধা নাম্বার, এরাও তো মাতিলে তো অনেক বেশ সময় লয়, কিন্তু এরা মাথা না মানে। আমি কইয়ার একটার কারণ হইল কোনো ক্যাম্পেইন নাই, যত ক্যাম্পেইন আছিল এটা ক্যাম্পেইন ওভারটি ওজন করিয়া ওটা গিয়া কাউন্সিলর হইয়া এটা সারেন্ডার হইয়া আর এটা হলতা ফাউরি লইছেন, মানে এটা ক্যাম্পেইনের স্লোগান আছে এটা দিলাইছেন। আর বাকি সমাজও সেও তারারে এই পজিশন থেকে হরাইতে চায় না দয়া করিয়া। আর এইটা একটা ডিফল্ট পজিশন ক্রিয়েট হইছে, যেখানে অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটির জায়গাত আনঅ্যাকাউন্টেবল একটা ভ্যাকুয়াম ক্রিয়েট হইছে। এই জায়গাত খুদিলার ক্যাম্পেইন যেটা, এটা হইলো একটা মুভমেন্টের অংশ, এবং আমি একটা চালাইয়া কয়েক দশক ধরিয়া একটার বাদে একটা এ টু জেড যত ক্যাম্পেইন হইয়া গেছে সফার, এবং যেগুলো হইয়া যায় কারেন্টলি, এটা সকলটি আমি চালাইয়া। এটা তো আমার কথা না, এটা হইলো ফ্যাক্ট। কেউ যদি একটা অস্বীকার করেন বা বুঝতে অসুবিধা হয় বা বুঝতে নারাজ হয়, আমি একটা যে হইয়ার আমি হইয়ার ও চেতনা লইয়া যে তাই আমারে যোগাযোগ করতে বা তাই যোগাযোগ করতে করিয়া হইতে ও জায়গাত আমার কথাটা রং, আর ও জায়গাত তাই করিয়া যাইটা ক্যাম্পেইনার আমি নাই। এইটা হইল গিয়া আমার সংক্ষেপ একটা প্রশ্ন। এটা আমার কোনো এটা কম্পিটিশন নাই, কারণ আমার তো এনে কোনো এমপি হইবারও আমার কোনো প্ল্যান নাই, আর মেম্বার অফ দি কাউন্সিল হইবার আমার কোনো প্ল্যান নাই, কোনো দরকার নাই। আমার দরকার এবং প্ল্যান যেটা, এটা হইলো আমরা কমিউনিটির নামে যারা যে পোস্ট আছেন এরা আমরা কমিউনিটির বেসিক নিড মিট করতা এবং বেসিক চ্যালেঞ্জ এবং বেসিক প্রবলেম যেগুলো আছে সমাজে ফেস করেন এই সমাজের এগুলো মিট করতে আর যদি পারেন না তাই পাবলিকলি হইতা যে এটা আমরা কাউন্সিলে করেন না আমরা এটা লইয়া মাইর করি আর কাউন্সিলের ভিতরে নথিপত্র দেখাইয়া তাই খুব কোন জায়গাত কোন সময় তাই সিটি ইলেকশন কোন কাউন্সিলর আরো কাউন্সিলরের গেছে বা ডাইরেক্টরের গেছে বা কোন কাউন্সিল এমপ্লয়ির গেছে বা কোন এজেন্সির গেছে তাই লেসনটা লইয়া তাই দেখা হোক চিঠিপত্র থাকলে এটা আমরা আবার বিবেচনা করবো বা এটার আমরা ইনক্লুড করবো নেক্সট রেলিভেন্ট বুলেটিন। আর বাংলাদেশি অনেক মানুষ যারা ইউরোপে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় আছে এবং এই কান্ট্রির বিভিন্ন জায়গায় যারা আছে তাদেরকে আমি এইটা বলবো, বাংলাদেশের মানুষের আন্তর্জাতিক অবস্থান সম্মানের সাথে থাকা উচিত, কারণ বাংলাদেশের এনাফ ঐতিহাসিক রিসোর্স আছে যেগুলো ডেপ্লয় করলে বাংলাদেশি মানুষের কোনো খারাপ অভিজ্ঞতা হওয়ার কথা নয়। এই যে অভিজ্ঞতা হচ্ছে এবং দুর্দশায় অনেক হাজার বাংলাদেশি আছে, এইটার জবাব দিতে হবে আমাদের যারা বাংলাদেশ ভিত্তিক পলিটিক্যাল পার্টির এজেন্সি আন্তর্জাতিক লেভেলে এনে মানুষকে বিভ্রান্ত করেন তাদের কাছে। আমি বলবো যে বাংলাদেশের পলিটিক্স দলীয় পলিটিক্স, গভর্নমেন্ট ভিত্তিক পলিটিক্সের কোনো জায়গা নেই। আন্তর্জাতিক বাংলাদেশি উদ্ভূত পরিবেশে যারা আছেন এদের জীবনে হচ্ছে আন্তর্জাতিক, তারা হচ্ছেন যাকে বলে ডিয়াসপোরা এবং প্রবাসী। প্রবাসী বাংলাদেশির বেসিক হিউম্যান রাইটস যেগুলা এগুলা বাংলাদেশিদের অবশ্যই আলোচনা করতে হবে, কিন্তু যৌথভাবে আলোচনা করতে হবে, সৎভাবে আলোচনা করবে, সৎ উদ্দেশ্য নিয়ে আলোচনা করতে হবে এবং বলতে হবে যে আমরা এটা আন্তর্জাতিক স্ট্যান্ডার্ডে আমরা করব, এটা আমরা দেশের এই বিষাক্ত যে ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডের ইনফ্লুয়েন্স আমরা এটা করব না। এটা যদি করা যায় তাহলে বাংলাদেশিদের অভিজ্ঞতা অনেক দ্রুত গতিতে উন্নত হবে আমি বিশ্বাস করি। এবং এই উদ্দেশ্যে আমি বলছি যে আরেকটি নতুন উদ্যোগ আমরা নেব ক্ষুদিলার আন্দোলন থেকে, যে টু ইউনাইট the Bangladeshi people abroad internationally on the basis of getting recognized treatment, recognized by international law. And that is something that I think is another exclusive, original world exclusive that I've just uttered. And I think that we have enough time in this bulletin that can be providing enough materials for thought for people until the next bulletin. So, এই সময় হইল গিয়া 4:40 GMT, 1740 UK time, 1640 GMT on Monday the 20th of July 2020, and we shall be covering the corruption of Roxana Fia's regime in Newham and John Bick's regime in Tower Hamlets in the next relevant bulletin, and we shall expose the corrupt role of a number of trade unionists and Labour Party members in Newham who are members of a de facto gang of crooks and liars who are causing housing problems and evictions and other nightmares for people who do not deserve this treatment. And Newham Council is a liability council, is an embarrassing council, is a not fit for council, fronted by Roxana Fiaz, who was recruited as part of an 18 or 17 strong group of Muslim stooge women by Gordon Brown to actually demonize the Muslim community under the pretext of radicalization. So they were supposed to be the vanguard among the Muslims of the prevent agenda to stop the radicalization. In fact, they have been the key source, or that platform has been one of the key sources, agencies of demonizing and spreading hatred against the Muslims in particular. And Ruxana Fiaz is the invention of that. Anyone like Michael Gillard, who said that she actually got the position as the candidate of the Labour Party because she had been plotting with John Gray and others since 2013, are wrong, because she may have been plotting, but she would never have got that had there not been enough promotion of her image as the acceptable Muslim woman. That means that what I said about Saida Varsi saying Islamophobia, that is the agenda. That most Muslim women are presumed to be radical, sympathetic to radicalism. And Roxana Fiaz is a rare one who is not a Muslim woman who is radical. So we shall be updating on Roxana Fiaz and the depth of her corruption and dishonesty, and how she has been complicit in daily denial and lying, and causing severe housing problems and hardships and deprivations and vulnerabilities. And we shall put in, as part of her gang, as quote credited by Michael Gillard, John Gray, the boy from Wales who claimed the unique qualification to certify Roxana Fiaz as fit. So until then, this is the end of this broadcast, ending the recording at 16:43 hours GMT, 17:43 hours UK time on Monday, the 20th of July 2020.